Hello everyone. If you love heartwarming animal stories and want to follow the inspiring journey of these adorable friends, don't forget to hit the subscribe button now so you won't miss any of our videos. Now, let's dive into today's emotional story. Danny had always been the class bully. He was the one who pushed kids in the hallways, made fun of their clothes, and laughed at the ones who weren't cool enough. At just 12 years old, Danny had already earned a reputation as someone to avoid. His sharp words and mocking tone were like weapons, making others fear him. But inside, there was a growing emptiness he couldn't quite understand. He had never learned the meaning of kindness. He was raised in a house where toughness was everything, and showing softness was a sign of weakness. One rainy afternoon, while Danny was walking home from school, he took a shortcut through a narrow alley. The rain had been falling heavily all day, and Danny was trying to avoid the puddles as he made his way toward home. Suddenly, something caught his eye. A small, trembling figure sat in the corner of the alley, its fur soaked and matted. Danny's heart stopped when he realized it was a dog, a tiny, shivering puppy huddled against the cold, frightened by the storm. For a moment, Danny hesitated. He had never been the type to care about animals. After all, he had more important things on his mind, like making sure he was the toughest kid in school. But something about this little dog, shaking under the pouring rain, tugged at something inside him. Something unfamiliar. A feeling he couldn't quite place. Without thinking too much, Danny approached the puppy, his feet squelching in the wet mud. He knelt down, gently coaxing the dog toward him. The puppy whimpered but didn't resist. "Hey, it's okay," Danny muttered, surprising himself with his own words. His usual bravado was gone, replaced with a soft and cautious tone. He scooped the puppy into his arms, feeling its cold, damp fur against his skin. It was a fragile little thing, and Danny, for the first time in a long while, felt a sense of responsibility. The dog needed him. He hurried home, and as he entered the front door, his mother raised an eyebrow at him. "What's that?" she asked. "I found him outside," Danny replied, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Can we keep him?" His mother looked at the puppy, then at Danny, her expression unreadable. "You sure you want to take care of a dog?" she asked. Danny nodded, his determination firming. "Yeah. I'll take care of him." And so, the puppy was named Milo. Over the next few days, Danny began to take care of Milo, feeding him, cleaning him, and making sure he was warm. Milo's big brown eyes gazed up at him with trust, and Danny slowly found himself attached to the dog. Milo would follow him everywhere, and in return, Danny found himself talking to the dog more and more, sharing thoughts he had never said out loud to anyone. In Milo's presence, the walls Danny had built around his emotions began to crack. For the first time, Danny felt needed. Milo needed him, and that responsibility changed something inside him. The anger and bitterness Danny once felt toward others slowly started to melt away. He began to look at the world differently, noticing things he had never seen before. He saw the kids he had bullied in a new light. He felt ashamed of the way he had treated them. One afternoon, Danny found himself standing in front of one of the boys he had made fun of for months, Tommy, a quiet kid with thick glasses. Danny shuffled nervously, not sure what to say, but the thought of Milo's trusting eyes pushed him forward. "I'm sorry," Danny blurted out, his voice hesitant. "For the things I said to you. I wasn't right." Tommy looked up, surprised, but he nodded slowly, accepting the apology. For the first time, Danny felt a sense of peace, something he had never experienced before. As the weeks passed, Danny's life began to change in ways he couldn't have imagined. He had started to open up, not just to Milo, but to the world around him. The dog, with his unshakable loyalty and calming presence, had been Danny's first real friend. Unlike the other kids who might judge him for his past behavior, Milo only offered love and affection, teaching Danny the beauty of unconditional care. It was through Milo's eyes that Danny began to see the world differently. At first, it was subtle. Danny would wake up in the mornings, his first sight being Milo's golden coat curled at the foot of his bed. It felt strange to have the dog with him, but comforting at the same time. Milo's wagging tail and excited jumps when Danny would return home from school became the highlight of his day. Each time Danny returned from school, it was like a celebration. Milo, with his big brown eyes, would be waiting at the door, excited and full of energy. This was something Danny had never experienced before. No one had ever been that happy to see him. The emptiness he had once felt was now filled with the warmth of the dog's devotion. One afternoon, while Danny was at the park, he watched as a group of kids played basketball. In the past, he would have mocked them or made fun of anyone who wasn't performing well, but today he stood back, watching with a different perspective. It wasn't about being the best or making fun of others, it was about enjoying the moment, just like Milo did when he chased after the ball. A new thought struck him: what if he could try being part of a group? What if he could enjoy playing without the need to always win? Milo, who had been playing fetch on the grass, ran over and nudged Danny's hand, pulling him out of his thoughts. Danny laughed and threw the ball for Milo, feeling a sense of peace wash over him as the dog dashed after it. His mind cleared for the first time in a long while. For the first time in ages, Danny wasn't worried about his reputation or how others saw him. All that mattered was the joy he felt in this moment with Milo. That evening, as he sat at the kitchen table, Danny found himself talking to his mom. For the first time in what felt like forever, he was opening up, sharing things that had been locked away for so long. He told her about the kids at school, about how he had seen them play basketball, and how he thought maybe he could join them. His mom looked at him, her eyes wide with pride. "I'm proud of you, Danny," she said quietly, as if the words were just as much for her as they were for him. It wasn't about the basketball, it was about the realization that Danny was starting to find himself again. As Danny's confidence grew, so did his relationship with Milo. The bond between them was something Danny had never experienced before. Every day, he felt his heart soften, his walls crumbling just a little bit more. Milo's playfulness made him laugh, and his unwavering loyalty made him feel safe. The dog had become more than just a pet, he was Danny's companion, his teacher, and his friend. One Saturday morning, while Danny and Milo were playing in the backyard, Danny's dad came outside. "You're doing great, son," he said, his voice gruff but genuine. "I've noticed a real change in you lately." Danny smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. It wasn't much, but it was enough. His dad hadn't said much to him before, and it meant the world that he was finally seeing Danny for who he was becoming, not the kid he had been. Later that afternoon, Danny found himself on the phone with Tommy, the boy he had once tormented. Tommy had always been the quiet, studious type, and Danny had used that as an excuse to pick on him. But now, with Milo by his side, Danny didn't want to be that person anymore. He wanted to make things right. "Hey, Tommy," Danny said, his voice slightly shaky. I just wanted to say sorry, for all the stuff I did." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Tommy's voice, soft but warm, replied, "It's okay, Danny. I've noticed the change. You're different now." It was a small step, but it felt like a giant leap for Danny. For the first time, he wasn't just apologizing because he had to, he was doing it because he truly wanted to. Milo's influence had awakened something in Danny that had been buried deep inside him for years. The dog had shown him that kindness was not a sign of weakness but a source of strength. As Danny's relationship with Milo continued to deepen, he found that he was slowly becoming a better version of himself. The changes in Danny were noticeable to everyone around him. His mom had started to notice how he interacted with his classmates, how he didn't shy away from conversation anymore. His dad commented on how Danny seemed to be more comfortable with himself, less guarded. The simple act of caring for Milo, of loving the dog without any expectation, had changed him from the inside out. But even though Danny was changing, he knew there was still a long way to go. He knew he couldn't change overnight. But with Milo by his side, Danny felt hopeful. He had found his first true friend, someone who saw him not as the bully he once was but as someone who was worthy of love and trust. And for the first time, Danny believed that he deserved that love too. As the weeks passed, Danny's transformation continued, but deep down, he was still uncertain. Although he had started to change, there were moments when his old self crept back into his thoughts. The doubt, the fear of rejection, and the weight of his past mistakes still loomed over him like a cloud, threatening to pull him back into his old ways. Yet, Milo's constant presence was a reminder that he didn't have to face these fears alone. The dog had become more than just a pet. Milo had become Danny's anchor. One chilly autumn afternoon, as Danny and Milo walked home from school, they passed the group of kids Danny had once tormented. The boys were laughing and playing football in the yard of a nearby house. The old urge to mock them, to show off, to prove himself, stirred within Danny. He glanced down at Milo, who was walking beside him, tail wagging. Milo's steady presence calmed Danny's nerves, but the voices of the kids echoed in his mind, tempting him to fall back into his old ways. "Hey, Danny! You want to come play?" one of the boys called out from across the street. Danny stopped in his tracks. His heart raced. The old him would have made some sarcastic remark or laughed it off. But the new Danny, the one who had been learning kindness, the one who had been trying to become a better person, was unsure. Milo looked up at him, sensing the tension in his posture. The dog gave a soft whine, as if encouraging him, as if saying, "You can do this." For a moment, Danny stood frozen, torn between his past and his present. The pressure of the situation was overwhelming, and the voices of the kids seemed louder, urging him to fall back into familiar behavior. But then, something shifted inside him. He wasn't that kid anymore. He didn't need to prove anything to them. He didn't need their approval. "I'll play," Danny called out, his voice steady despite the anxiety swirling inside. The boys cheered as he jogged over to join them. His heart beat fast, but this time it was out of excitement, not fear. Milo trotted behind him, happily following as if he were proud of Danny for taking this first step. As the game began, Danny found himself laughing and joking with the other kids. They weren't laughing at him, they were laughing with him. For the first time, Danny felt like he was part of something, like he wasn't on the outside looking in. Milo stayed by his side, sitting nearby and watching with interest. Every time Danny made a good play, the kids cheered, and for the first time, Danny realized that they weren't mocking him, they were genuinely supportive. And that made all the difference. By the end of the afternoon, as the game wound down, Danny felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced in years. He had faced his fear, he had resisted the temptation to slip back into his old, negative patterns, and he had made real connections with others. As the boys started to leave, Danny walked back home with Milo, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Good job, boy," Danny said to Milo, scratching the dog's ears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Milo wagged his tail, looking up at Danny as if to say, "You're doing just fine, kid." When they got home, Danny's mom noticed the change in him immediately. "You look happy, Danny," she remarked, setting down her bag. "Did something good happen today?" Danny hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Yeah, Mom. Something good did happen." Later that night, as Danny sat at the dinner table with his family, he felt more connected to them than he ever had before. He felt like a part of something again. He realized that the bond he had with Milo had become a symbol of his own journey, one of self-discovery, courage, and redemption. Milo had helped him open his heart and let go of the anger and fear that had once controlled him. But Danny knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, but with Milo by his side, he was ready to face them. In the following days, Danny began to make amends for the wrongs he had done. He reached out to Tommy, his old schoolmate, and apologized for the bullying. He apologized to others he had hurt in the past. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. And every time he saw Milo's face, every time the dog greeted him with that unconditional love, Danny felt like he was becoming the person he had always wanted to be. Milo had not only saved him from his own worst tendencies, but had also given him a chance at a new life, one where kindness and friendship replaced fear and cruelty. As Danny looked at the dog, he realized that Milo had taught him the most important lesson of all, the power of compassion. And in that moment, Danny knew that he would never let go of the lessons Milo had shown him. As the days passed, Danny's transformation became more and more evident. His relationships with his classmates improved, and he began to develop a newfound sense of empathy that he hadn't known was possible. His parents noticed the positive change too. He was no longer the sullen, angry boy who had struggled with expressing his emotions. Instead, Danny was opening up, embracing kindness, and showing real maturity for his age. But despite these victories, a storm was brewing in Danny's life. The once hidden, darker side of his past began to rear its head again, testing his newfound resolve. Danny was about to face a challenge that would put his emotional growth to the ultimate test, and he didn't know if he was ready. One evening, as Danny and Milo were taking their usual walk through the neighborhood, they stumbled upon a familiar face, a group of boys Danny had once called his friends, but whom he had distanced himself from after his change in attitude. The group, led by Jake, who had always been the ringleader of Danny's old, troublesome behavior, greeted him with their usual teasing. "Hey, Danny," Jake called out, a mischievous grin playing on his face. "Where's the little dog? Playing fetch or just being your new best friend?" Danny's stomach churned. Old patterns, old insults, were returning. His heart raced as he looked at Milo, who was standing calmly beside him, sensing the tension. Jake stepped closer, as did the other boys, their eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Come on, Danny," Jake taunted. "You're one of us again, right?" The group's jeering started to remind Danny of his old self, when cruelty was normal, and bullying was an easy way to fit in. A part of him, The part that used to crave approval, wanted to fall back into that world. He could feel it, the pull of the past, the comfort of being accepted into this group, even if it meant hurting others again. His fists clenched at his sides, and for a brief moment, the old Danny almost emerged. But then, something shifted inside him. Milo nudged his leg, as if sensing the internal struggle. Danny bent down to look at his dog, whose warm, trusting eyes seemed to say, "You're better than this. You've changed." Milo's loyalty, his silent, unwavering love, reminded Danny of how far he had come. It was then that Danny realized that this was his moment of truth. It wasn't just about avoiding the pain of past mistakes, it was about showing real courage, the courage to stand up for what was right. Danny took a deep breath and straightened up, facing the group of boys. "I'm not like that anymore, Jake," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness twisting in his stomach. "I'm not going to play your games anymore." Jake raised an eyebrow, his grin faltering slightly. "What do you mean?" he asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. "I mean," Danny continued, his confidence growing, "I'm done with all of this. I'm done with being cruel and laughing at other people's expense. I've changed. And I'm not going to let you drag me back into it." For a moment, there was a heavy silence. The group of boys looked at each other, surprised. Jake opened his mouth, probably to make another taunt, but Danny spoke first. "I've learned something," he said, looking down at Milo. "This dog, he taught me how to be kind. He showed me what real love looks like. And I'm not going to let you ruin that. I'm not going to hurt people anymore." A stunned silence followed Danny's words. Jake and the others stood there, uncertain of how to respond. Then, slowly, Jake backed off. He didn't say anything more, but the group, realizing they no longer had the power to provoke Danny, slowly turned and walked away. As they disappeared into the distance, Danny felt a rush of relief. His heart was pounding, but he knew he had done the right thing. He had stood up for himself, for Milo, and for the changes he had made. He hadn't let the old, toxic behavior drag him back. And it was all because of Milo, the dog who had saved him from himself. Danny knelt down to Milo, who had been patiently sitting by his side throughout the entire exchange. "Thanks, buddy," Danny whispered, running his hand through the dog's fur. "You're my hero." Milo wagged his tail and licked Danny's hand, as if to say, "We're in this together." As they walked back home, Danny felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had faced the hardest test of his transformation, and he had passed. Milo had not only saved him once, but he had continued to guide him through the toughest moments of his life, teaching him that true strength came from kindness, not from hurting others. When they arrived home, Danny went straight to his parents. He had something important to say. "I want to apologize," Danny said, looking them both in the eye. "I've hurt people in the past, and I'm sorry. I want to be better. I'm not the same person I used to be." Jane and Peter exchanged a glance, both surprised and moved by Danny's words. They embraced him tightly, tears of pride filling their eyes. "We're so proud of you, Danny," his mother said softly. "You've come so far." In that moment, Danny realized that the real change hadn't just been about leaving behind the past, it was about learning to accept himself, flaws and all. It was about embracing kindness, love, and forgiveness. And with Milo by his side, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The dog who had once been a forgotten stray had now become Danny's greatest teacher, showing him the power of redemption and the strength to embrace a new life full of hope and promise. Danny's journey from a bully to a kind-hearted individual illustrates the power of compassion, not only in healing others but in healing oneself. Milo, the dog, becomes the catalyst for Danny's change, teaching him that love and empathy can break down walls of anger and hurt. The story demonstrates that we are all capable of growth and redemption, regardless of our past mistakes. Just as Milo's loyalty and gentleness helped Danny open his heart, in real life, pets can offer emotional support and teach us essential values such as responsibility, patience, and the importance of helping others. This story also emphasizes the importance of self-reflection and accountability in personal growth. It reminds us that change is possible when we choose kindness over cruelty and when we are open to learning from the love and support of those around us, whether human or animal. The transformation in Danny shows that no one is beyond redemption, and that change, while challenging, is always within reach if we allow ourselves to grow and heal.